to Weekly Reddit. We will be looking at the best stories from March 2021. Don't dox the customers. So, some years back, I was doing support for networking devices. We weren't an ISP. We just sold and troubleshot networking devices, routers, switches, etc. I still had a decent working knowledge of how most of the big ISPs in the country operated, since a lot of my calls involved the internet going out, the customer panicking, looking at their internet box, their router, and calling the company whose name was on there. At which point we obviously had to troubleshoot the router and the internet connection, and it was usually, though not always, a problem with the internet connection. So our story begins with one of these calls, very standard. Hello, thank you for calling company, my name is Truly, how can I help you? Hi, my internet is out, I need it back up. Alright, have you already been in touch with your internet provider? That's you guys. I'm afraid it's not, but since you're here, we should still troubleshoot It's your name on the box. He was referring to a router. I am aware, but we do not provide internet services. We only sell the equipment. Well, who's my internet provider, then? I'm not sure, sir. Who do you pay your internet bill to? You guys. I am fairly certain that is not the case, sir. You're calling me a liar. No, sir, I'm just trying to tell you that we don't. What's your name? Truly. I want your full name. And your employee number? I'm afraid I don't feel comfortable giving out my full name, and we don't really have employee numbers. You have to give me your full name. I'm a customer. I'm sorry, sir, but I do not have to do so. However, I assure you that I am the only Truly in my department. Fine. I am going to write an article about this. I am a journalist in a big newspaper, you know. You're going to be fired before this is all said and done. Oh. I'll admit that I didn't have much of a response ready for that one. I wouldn't be surprised if your company ends up going under from this. We're a pretty important paper when it comes to consumer rights. I couldn't help myself. Which newspaper is it? Big mistake. Huge. Were you trying to dox me? Yes. He actually said dox. No, sir. I just ask. You're trying to dox me. I can't believe this. Who the hell do you think you are? Sir, no, I just figured, if there's going to be an article abo. I demand a manager. I need to speak to someone up the chain. This is outrageous. You can't treat a customer like this. Give me your manager. At this point, my manager, who's been listening in on the last couple of minutes, nods for me to transfer. She pretty quickly finds out that it's an ISP problem, and told me that he had been quite pleasant to her throughout their conversation. I'll never forget that strange man. My team has a nemesis. This isn't my first time posting in this sub. Up until now I've mostly posted about funny stories or bizarre incidents, but this is a wholly different beast. It's also really long. I'm a senior network engineer working in a secondary school in the UK. My team consists of 5 members, myself, another senior engineer, Rob, a support technician, Andy, our new apprentice, Tyler, and a teacher from senior leadership, Kat. Kat doesn't do much within the team with regards to IT, but acts more as a line manager to make sure we're meeting targets, and to meet with the governors on our behalf. I've not mentioned the structure of the team before, but in this story it's particularly relevant. Names have been changed to keep people anonymous. On to the story. About a year ago a new IT teacher started working at the school, who I'll call Mr. X for simplicity's sake. As he joined when schools were shut, due to what's been going on in the world, we didn't get a chance to meet him in person, so at first all of our interactions with him were via email or Teams. The emails were all what you'd expect, nothing out of the ordinary. One day Mr. X emails and asks about Power BI, since he had just heard about it and wants to use it to do things like track student grades etc. I email back and say he's more than welcome to use it. We're a 365 school and the basic version is included in our volume license. I do however advise him that the school already pays for a software called Formatrix that is specifically designed for schools' performance data, and that all of our staff use. He replies that he had training on Formatrix when he started but thinks Power BI would work better. On this point I personally disagreed but didn't say anything as maybe he just had a preference. I didn't think anything more of it until a few weeks later Mr. X emailed in asking for the full version of Power BI Pro for all staff. He says he showed his data tracker in Power BI to the deputy head and told him it would work better if all of the staff used it. The only problem being that for users to share their work in the program they need Pro. So I sit down and run the numbers. Every teacher would need it if it was going to replace Formatrix. So that would be over 100 staff. Even with the massive discount we would get from being an education institution, the cost of Power BI Pro for that many users was more than double the cost of our Formatrix license for the entire school trust, not to mention needing to purchase more Power BI licenses than we would need in case staff numbers change. Combine that with training all staff on a new system when they're all already used to the other program, and it just seems a bit ridiculous. So I had a meeting with the deputy head and Mr. X over Teams where I laid out my above points and the DH, very rationally, said no way to Mr. X's request. A week later I got a Teams call from Andy. The gist of it was, I just had a weird call from Mr. X. He says he wants me to log into our 365 admin console and screen share with him. Apparently he's been on the phone to Microsoft and they've said that Power BI is cheaper for schools and you were looking in the wrong place for the costing. This boils my blood for a number of reasons. 1. He's not believed me when I laid out the facts to him. 2. He's gone behind my back to another member of my team and implied I don't know how to do my job. And 3. He wants to view a secure console that he shouldn't be going anywhere near. So I ask Andy to call Mr. X and then add me in. He does and I ask Mr. X to explain himself. The response I got was to the effect of, well, I phoned Microsoft and they said it was only X amount per user for schools. Me. Yes. That is true. Okay, do me a favor. Is that per month? Knowing full well it is. Mr. X, yes. Me, okay, now times that by 130. Now times that by 12. That's the same figure I presented to you in the meeting with the deputy head. At this point he left the call without saying anything more. A week later was the beginning of the summer holidays, so we didn't hear anything more from him. Until September came around, and schools reopened. And that is where things began to escalate. Every day we received at least one email from him into our help desk, all with the same subject, send a runner. No details of the issue, nothing typed into the message itself. More often than not it was something that did not require a physical presence, students forgetting passwords etc., which, considering the global situation where we need to limit contact, was becoming quite distressing and frankly rather annoying. I logged a complaint about him to senior leadership over the emails and a week later we started to only receive one per week, and all written to include the issues in the email. However, this then invited a different problem. He was sending emails at the end of his lessons, so by the time someone replied or attended, if needed, we were too late. For example, kid forgets a password, needs a reset. By the time we get the email the lesson is over and the student had been sat doing nothing for 2 hours. We send the new password back to Mr. X and he can't tell him what it is since he's teaching a different class. Or, email received saying monitor not working, and he goes to the room, there's a completely different class though with another teacher who tells him oh yeah, that one over there was switched off at the plug, but I just turned it on myself. Again, this starts to really annoy me, so I keep a log of everything. Around the end of October we refreshed a number of our staff laptops, so as part of that I had to retire the older devices. Mr. X's laptop was only a year old, but I decided to give him one of the new ones since he teaches IT and runs a lot of specialist software. My logic being, maybe doing something nice for him will get him to lay off us a bit. Nope. For context, his office is inside a metal pod. I've mentioned these before in another post here, that kills Wi-Fi signal. Because of this, my team installed a number of Ethernet cables and ran them to each desk, and told all staff in those offices to use Ethernet on their laptops when in the office. What, dear people, do we think Mr. X did after getting the brand new laptop? Why, he never plugged it in and ran 5 speed tests a day on the Wi-Fi, while in the office, and sent screenshots to all of us. For 2 whole weeks. Rob at this point was getting annoyed and took the laptop to test it in the pod. On the Wi-Fi, 7.65 Mbps down plugged into the Ethernet, 987.14 Mbps down. I've memorized those numbers, and I doubt I will ever forget them until the day I die. Another complaint logged against Mr. X. December rolls around and for about a month and a half Mr. X has been suspiciously quiet, so I'm assuming that the complaints have finally done some good. Until the last day of term, when I was covering for Andy on the help desk, and Mr. X decides to pay me a personal visit. He puts down his nice new laptop and says that he's trying to install software on it, but it's not letting him. I explain that our group policy stops anyone that isn't an admin from installing software, so I'll have to do it for him, which I'm happy to do. As I'm installing the software, the following conversation occurs. Mr. X, you know, I've had nothing but problems with this laptop. Me. Excuse me? Mr. X, well it's just not very good. I had loads of issues with the Wi-Fi and now software. Me. The problems you had weren't to do with the laptop. Your network card is so good you get almost a gig on a hardline. It's got an i7 and an SSD, as well as 8 GB of RAM. No one else with this model has complained about it. Objectively, this is the best device in the school. Mr. X, fuck off. Me. You know what, you can install the software yourself. Mr. X, what? Come on man. Me, no. You think you know more about it than I do? Well then you can fix it yourself. At which point I promptly logged out, stood up, walked off, and made yet another formal complaint. After this I had a meeting with the head, whereby he informed me that they were going to be putting Mr. X on probation. He also told me something very interesting, that Mr. X had expressed interest in Kat's job, and that he wanted to line manage my team. My response to that was that, in no uncertain terms, if Mr. X ever got the job, I would be handing in my notice that same day. They had then reassured me that he would never consider Mr. X in that role since it was clear that he had not been respecting my team. Here was where I thought it had ended. After the Christmas break, schools did not reopen and classes were held over Teams. We didn't receive a single email from Mr. X in this time. Bliss. In this time the government very kindly donated the school some money for new laptops for students, and we also purchased some new devices as part of our refresh plan. The closure was actually good for us since it gave us time to set them up. Every department got at least 32 new laptops to use in lessons upon their return. Monday this week. I send an email to departments telling them about their new laptops, and saying that they need to come and sign the forms to get the keys to their cabinets. I will be out on the help desk all day with the forms and keys. Everyone shows up. Everyone except one person. The next day we got an email from the deputy head saying that Mr. X wanted to collect the key from him and not us. Petty. But as long as he signs the paperwork I don't care. We then get an email from Mr. X. If these are for my department, can you install the following software on them? I'm one step ahead. Good morning, Mr. X. As these are for your department, this software has already been installed on every device. Thank you, and I hope you have a nice day. No further response about the laptops. However, over the next 10 minutes we receive 3 emails from him, all saying desktop missing G key. Later that day, we get another email from Mr. X. One of the new laptops is saying no logon servers when a student tries to use it. Can these all be checked please? And he CCs in the head, deputy, cat and one of our governors. Because of course he does. I then put Tyler, my new apprentice, on the job. Tyler spends the entire rest of the day logging on each of the 32 laptops and testing all the software and the internet. It turns out the no logon server error was because a student had accidentally turned off the Wi-Fi on that one laptop. Tyler emails Mr. X back and says that he can come and collect the laptops from the help desk as they have all been checked. Thursday morning Mr. X shows up and then proceeds to take every laptop out, one by one, and log them in front of Tyler without saying a word. Once he's done, he finally speaks and says, I just wanted to make sure they were actually done, and walks off with the trolley. Later that day we get an email from Mr. X with a screenshot of a laptop. The others are all download speed 100 Mbps or higher. This one is 40. I'll bring it down after this lesson. By the time he brings it to us, it's back up to a normal speed, as when he checked it, it was downloading a Windows update. Last thing on Thursday we get a message from Kat into our Teams chat. Kat, hi all. I've had repeated reports that, since Monday, 2 of the computer rooms have had profile and image issues. Can someone check them first thing in the morning please? Me, hi Kat. We've not had anything like that emailed into our technical address. Those rooms were open to key workers' kids over lockdown and we didn't have reports then either. Rob was also in those 2 rooms yesterday installing software for Mr. M and didn't notice anything wrong with any computer. What do you mean by profile and image issues? Kat, interesting. I've had emails to me personally from Mr. X about the rooms saying the computers weren't working because of profile and image problems, but he was really vague. It seemed like he just heard those 2 words somewhere and didn't really know what they meant. Me, thanks Kat. I'll get Tyler or Andy to check them, but I don't think there's anything wrong. Could you forward me those emails from Mr. X please? As I'm on my way out of the building at the end of the day, I walk past Mr. X and hear him talking to another teacher, complaining that since he signed for the new laptops he now needs to check his ones weekly for damage, and that he thinks my team should be doing it and not him. I can say with utmost certainty that I am now 110% done with this man. FCK this man. I'm still logging records of his behavior, as are the rest of my team, but at this point I don't know if reporting him anymore is even going to do anything, as it's now been a year and he's still acting the way he is. He's the Thanos to my Avengers, the Darkseid to my Justice League, the John Doe to my Mills and Somerville. Our nemesis. FCK this man. I did what my mum told me to do, and got revenge. Disclaimer, this story is not meant to belittle single mothers nor people with mental illness, and yes, I do love my mom, but this was a story about how things can come back to bite you. So just some backstory here. My parents divorced when I was just in kindergarten, so no more than 6. My mom got full custody of us and she suffered from mental illness. I believe she has borderline personality disorder, and she was also a typical narcissistic parent. Anyway, ever since the divorce she would always tell us how it was not her fault we didn't have enough money for things and blame my dad. Example, if there was nothing to eat for breakfast and we complained like small children do when they were hungry, she snapped, "It's your father's fault, so cry to him." I just learned never to complain and do without and spent my childhood taking care of her. My sister and I were trained from when I was about 8, my sister 10, to come right home from school and do our homework and clean the house and take care of ourselves. Don't ask mum to make dinner, make it yourself, and all of the chores so mom doesn't have to do anything. It sounds bizarre, but we know that was normal, as well as being hit and told on a daily basis that we were worthless. It got worse my senior year of high school. My grandma died a few months before that summer and my mom quit her job and blew through the money my grandma left her before the summer was over. This was close to $75,000 back in 2000. She refused to get another job and kept coming up with excuses not to work. That is, I need a break. Get off my back. I hurt my leg, etc., while she was going out drinking with her friend and acting like a carefree teenager. So I spent my senior year working hard at school, at my part-time job after school, and pretty much taking care of an overgrown child who refused to work or help out. Anytime a utility shut off or there was no food left in the house, she just griped, "You have a job. Why can't you pay it?" If I brought up the fact that my dad sent her child support, she would just complain that she had my sister's tuition, which I later learned was BS. She would flaunt that child support check and laugh and refer to it as mommy's paycheck. Flash forward to when I am about to choose a college and my mom keeps bellyaching about the costs and of course has zero saved in a college fund. I couldn't afford a private university since I only was offered a partial scholarship, so I decided to go to a reasonably priced and still highly regarded state university. My freshman year I was pretty much able to swing the cost of tuition and room and board. I lived on campus. Since last year of high school I filed my taxes and FAFSA as soon as my W-2s came in, so I had a decent amount of grants. During my first year of college, I almost became unable to receive financial aid for my second year of college. Why? My W-2s were mailed to my home address and my mum, being the caring and supportive mother she was, shredded them and threw them in the trash. I found out because my sister was home that weekend and saw it. My mom denied, and when I came home for spring break and pressed her for it, she lied and said her friend had them. Her friend was a CPA. My sister called my mum out on this bluff by calling the friend who said she did not have any of our tax information. She was very concerned and told me and my sister to request duplicate W-2s and have them sent home, and she will have my mum send them over to me. My mom was pissed that we had checked with her friend and called her out on her bluff, but true to her word, her friend did my taxes for me and my FAFSA. I had offered to pay her or at least babysit for her, but she told me it was okay. I think she knew my mom was mentally unstable and felt sorry for me and my sister. At this point I learned that my mum had not been helping out my sister at all with tuition like she claimed, and my sister had mentioned it to my dad, who had called her out and demanded to know where the child support was going to. My mom insisted he wasn't paying her enough money and that's why she couldn't help us out. During my second year of college my W-2s were once again sent home and my mum once again accidentally threw them in trash. I had to request duplicate W-2s from my summer job not just once but twice because she kept throwing them in the trash. I filed my tax return late that year and as a result my FAFSA was filed late, so I wasn't able to get the full amount I was receiving before. Anytime I complained to her about money or no food in the house, it was, "Complain to your father." Well, the summer before my third year I was burned out on my mum's BS. I was working full-time for the summer and saving as much as I could, but she was refusing to help me out at all while I was home with food or anything. She was pissed that instead of paying the phone bill so she could make long-distance calls to her online friends and spend all day in chat rooms, this was back when we had dial-up, I had the audacity to spend my hard-earned money on a cell phone and pay that bill myself. She told everyone I should just drop out because I wasn't applying myself hard enough. I was in the honors program. And she would play martyr with all her friends about it's so hard when you have kids in college and they eat your out of house and home and come to you for money. At the end of the summer I had saved $1,000, but the school won't let me move into the dorm unless I paid 50% up front, which I was about $10K. I didn't know what to do, as all summer the university had told me I was fine, and then on move-in day told me I couldn't move into the dorm. I called my dad in a panic and he spoke to someone who agreed to give me 24 hours. I moved in and the next day my dad showed up first thing with a coffee and a donut for me and told me not to worry, he was going to fix this once and for all. We went from office to office on campus and he co-signed a loan, which he later paid off for me, and then he paid the balance on my tuition for the loan didn't cover. He then took me out to lunch and told me the truth. My mum never helped my sister with her tuition. My sister had graduated the summer before my junior year of college. My sister later confirmed this but was not surprised my mum had lied. My dad had co-signed loan to help my sister out, which he later paid off for her, and my sister was able to get a scholarship and to do coup to pay for her last 2 years. He also advised me that my mom was not so poorly off. As part of the divorce settlement he had to pay the mortgage and property taxes on our house, and even though my sister was now out on her own he was still paying her the same amount of child support of about $2K a month, despite the fact that I was living on campus for 75% of the year and my mom was not giving me a dime. Just to give you some clarification, my tuition and room and board before financial aid kicked in was $15K a year, so she could have easily helped me out with school, since after financial aid kicked in, when I was able to get it, the balance was usually $6K. I was hurt to think my mom was just living off my child support and constantly making me feel guilty for wanting anything or for not being able to cater to her every whim. She would get pissed that I wouldn't come home on the weekends to help her clean the house that I was not living in. I thought about how bad she made me feel growing up and made me feel worthless, when in fact, had it not been for me or my sister she would have not had a roof over her head after the divorce. He asks me to grant him access to my account so he could prove my mom was not paying for college and that I was. He asked me how I would feel if he took care of college instead of paying my mum child support. Sounded good to me. He even told me I could spend my breaks at his house instead of my mom's. I called my mom and told her that my dad had taken care of the issue and she had no remorse. She told me it was my own fault for not planning my finances better and for pissing away my money all summer. I just played it dumb and said she was right, but pointed out I had done what she told me to do and complained to my dad. A month later my mum called me up pissed. My dad had spoken with the courts and there was going to be a hearing in their divorce case. My dad had proven that my mom had not been paying for mine nor my sister's tuition for college, and that was the very reason my dad was obligated to pay child support till I was done college. Since I was living on campus, it didn't make sense to pay her child support when I was not living at home most of the year and she was given me 1 penny. My dad told the judge he would gladly pay for me to finish college, but he was not going to pay my mum any more child support, no pay the mortgage on the house. If my mum didn't want to take over the mortgage, they could sell the house and I could live with him over my breaks. My mom was freaking out over this and calling me selfish. I just reminded her that my tuition must cost a lot more than what she got in child support, since she was never able to help me with costs of school. She just kept laying guilt trips on me about how I was selfish because she didn't get to go to college right after high school and how she never got to have 4 carefree years of college. I pointed out to her that she had not worked since my grandma died about 3 years ago and that I was working and going to school at that time while she got to live a carefree life. She pretty much ripped me a new one at that point. She tried to get back at my dad by not paying utilities on the house to make it seem like she needed the money. She then told me that the electric and water were now shut off, so if I wanted to come home for winter break I needed to help her out. She had moved in with her boyfriend at his condo. I just told her that I would miss her but that I would just go to my dad's for winter break. She was pissed and cried about how selfish I was for not wanting to come home for Christmas. Side note, the Christmas before my present was throwing out many of my personal belongings. Why? My mom was pissed off at me that I didn't want to come home one weekend to help her clean because to get home I had to take 2 buses, 2 trains, spend $20 one way and wait for her to hopefully remember to pick me up at the train station, which was a whole 20-minute drive for her after I had traveled for 4 to 5 hours because I had finals and I told her I would help clean for the holidays once I came home for winter break. Her response? She took all of my things, threw them in boxes and threw them out on the front lawn. Most of my things were destroyed by being left on in the rain and I away most of them. I told my mom that I would come and visit her over my winter break once she got the utilities turned on. I told my dad what was going on and he said he and my stepmom and my half-brother and sister were thrilled I was going to stay with them for winter break and he can get me a job in his office as well for winter break. He also called my mom and reminded her that the child support had not stopped, and they were going to list the house in a few months, so what was this nonsense about the utilities being shut off? She was pissed but magically came up with the money to turn them back on. That spring my dad officially by the court took over my college tuition and he even made sure I got my full financial aid since he had picked up W-2s for me. My mum lost her child support and was told by the judge that she better cooperate with the sale of the house and keep up with the utility bills etc. so it would sale. Her boyfriend moved in with her till the house sold and she moved to another time zone. The real kicker? It was cheaper for my dad to pay college costs than to pay her child support. To summarize, my mom abused and exploited me and I got my revenge by causing her to lose her child support and free rent by doing what she told me to do for years, complain to my father. No regrets. Edit, so many comments and upvotes. Thanks. Some of you have asked, are things better now? Depends on what you mean. I am not as close to her as I am father and stepmom whom I grew closer to after college and still close to this day, but I still have a relationship with her. We talk but I have learned not to trust her because she will let me down. A couple of years ago we were supposed to meet for my birthday and she stood me up. Now I don't included her at all when I plan birthdays or holidays. And some have asked how she treated us growing up. She wasn't 100% bad but her bad moments were pretty bad. Granted, I have met a lot of people who have had it worse, so I try to remember that. After college, she was trying to pull the same pity cards she had when I was in school. This time she was trying to convince me to move from NJ to TN. She had moved before my last year of college to a different time zone and didn't even bother to tell me or my sister. She just took off. I liked the area and told her I would see if I can find a job and would consider taking her up on her offer to live in her guest room temporarily. She right away starting laying me on a guilt trip and I hung up. She then called my sister and complained about how I have a daughter that doesn't want to take care of me. My sister and I both laugh about that. She wasn't even 50, perfectly healthy and refused to work. No way was I going to move in and take care of her. She pretty much spent most of my adult life in and out of mental hospitals and trying to convince us that either we want to live with her or we want her to live with us. She moved into my grandparents' old house in Philly. They passed away years ago. Didn't keep up with the repairs and had to sell it for less than what she felt it was worth. Wound up staying in various relatives' guest rooms and coming up with excuses not to work, and finally wore at her welcome at so many people's houses that she wound up in the hospital and then in a shelter and now lives in subsidized housing. It's a cute apartment and is like a loft style, but guess what? She still complains about how bad she has it and how no one wants to take her in. Lol. Thanks again for all of the kind words, upvotes, and messages. I know I grew up in a less than perfect situation, but I always remind myself that there are many others who have had it worse. I at least had my father and my sister. And that going through something like that has taught me to be strong and to rely on myself. This looks like a garage sale. A few years back, my family got together to clean out and reorganize my parents' garage. This involved basically emptying out the very full and disorganized large garage. We moved everything onto the driveway. As we were about halfway through moving stuff out, a car pulls up and an older woman gets out. We ask if she needs something and she's looking around as she replies, "Oh, I'm just visiting garage sales in the area." "Oh, that's fun," says my sister. "But this isn't a garage sale. We are just organizing." This woman nods, and begins picking up things to look at. She turns my way. "How much for this?" She's holding an old sketchbook of mine from high school. "That's mine and we aren't selling anything," I snap as I rip it from her hands. This woman is completely unfazed. She keeps browsing our stuff for a moment and only looks up when she finds me body blocking her from entering the garage. "Look," I tell her. "This is not a garage sale. We are organizing things. You need to leave. We aren't selling or giving you anything. I'm sorry you're confused." She finally turns around and starts walking away. As she goes, she picks up a random scarf from a box. My sister snatches it from her hand and the woman snaps. "I saw your signs. You just don't want to sell to me. I'll call the police." This looks like a garage sale and all I want to do is buy something. By this point, my sister, mother, father, husband and I are gathered around her. Her voice has entered frequencies of which dogs are only capable of hearing. "Call the cops," I challenge. "We will tell them all about the crazy bitch who trespassed after being told to leave and attempted robbery." She stares me down for a moment, then mutters a few curse words my way. "Your garage sale is fucking junk anyway," she sneers, turning on her heel and heading to her car. She peeled out from in front of the house, flipping us the bird out her window the entire way. All of this over fucking vanilla ice cream. I'm a cashier at a Canadian grocery chain, specifically the self-serve machine operator, customer service desk. I've worked there for almost 2 years and have seen a lot of bullshit. But an experience this week really stood out to me as some peak-choosing beggar behavior. So I'm at my desk late at night, about 8:39, when CB came up to me holding 8 pints, 8, of Haagen-Dazs vanilla ice cream. CB: "Hey, so these were on sale over a week ago but you didn't have them, so can I get the sale price now?" Me: "Hi, we don't do that, so sorry. We used to give out sale rain checks but haven't since the pandemic got real bad last March." CB: "But, location to the north, does it?" Me: "Well, I can't speak for them, but we usually don't. I personally have never seen my manager authorize it before." CB: "Aren't you a manager?" Me: "A 5 feet 5 inches baby-faced 21-year-old, no, I'm not. Let me get the manager in charge." CB: "Yeah, do that." So I called the manager in charge, MIC, and she came over. She tried to explain to him that it's against our company policy and she'd have to call our store manager to get approval. CB told her to call him immediately. You know, at almost 9 at night. Mick said she couldn't do that but could hold the ice cream for him and get the store manager to call him tomorrow. But he started kicking up more of a fuss, so Mick relented and told him he could get the sale price right now as a courtesy, but this was a one-time thing. I opened a till, scanned one of the pints, and changed the price to $4.99. CB: "Wait, the sale was $3.50. Me: "No, sir, it wasn't." CB: "Yes, it was." Me: "No, it was $4.99. I remember because the Haagen-Dazs and Ben & Jerry's were on sale for the same price and I bought the Ben & Jerry's." CB turns to Mick. It's $3.50. I can go home and get my old receipt to show you. Mick, no, they're right, it was $4.99. CB, I can go get the receipt. Mick, sir, I put up those sales tags myself. It was $4.99. I don't know why your receipt said that, but I can't change it to $3.50, only $4.99, sorry. CB, ugh, fine. I swear it was $3.50, but whatever. I'll just get two then. So we gave him 2 pints for $4.99 and he stomped off grumbling. Mick and I griped about the dude and she promised to tell our store manager about him. Hope he doesn't come back. I just love the entitlement some of these douche nuggets have. P.S. CB also asked Mick if our store could order 50 pints of Haagen-Dazs vanilla bean for him. I'm still wondering WTF one person would do with all that. Use them in a restaurant? Eat lots of pie a la mode? Present them as offerings to a Haagen-Dazs god? I seriously don't know. Call me lazy girl while you skip off to drink, I'll make you suffer for it. So this happened a few years ago on a relatively large project. We were building a 4-level house from the ground up. At the time I was 23, working with my dad, the boss, and my stepmom's cousin who was dubbed in a previous post is Max. Fake name. Max is an older gentleman in his 50s, who is, for a lack of a better word, gross. He is the type of person to knock something over that injures you and laughs and tells you to be careful next time. Needless to say, he doesn't think I, 23, female at the time, can do what he can. So he refers to me as girl. Now on to the main part of the story. We had just gotten joists and trusses for the top 2 levels and the roof. It is also 6 p.m., also known as universal quitting time for construction workers, unless you work for my dad, Max, who has been working with us long enough to know we don't quit until after we've cleaned up, has vanished. Dad looks around, where's Max? I shrug. Go inside and get him. We lived just down the street from this job. So I go and find Max sitting on the couch in his dirty sweaty clothes and beer in his hand, half gone. Done already, lazy girl? This is a new one and I'm pissed. Dad says we aren't done. He grumbles but downs the rest of his beer and follows me out. We get back and my dad is already moving some of the joists into place and orders me and Max to bring the rest. Sourly I do as asked and grab one. Max sticks around and makes comments about me under his breath. Come on, lazy girl. This one he says loud enough for everyone to hear, as if I was a sled dog. I think. Lovely. Dear readers, cue my petty revenge. I grab one end and do a shuffling walk, thinking at most I'll bang his knee. Painful, but no lasting harm. I hear that sound that I'm pretty sure every guy knows as a gasp/wheeze/pained cry. I turn around to look. Max is standing directly behind the joist, holding squarely in front of his junk, looking like he wants to vomit. I may have done it a couple more times. I was not called lazy girl again. Before anyone defends him and tells me I'm awful, let me tell you how he knows he is supposed to carry these on his side. Also, he never once changed positions over the dozen different ones we moved. He simply wanted me to carry more weight. Edited to explain the setting better. Rude roommates get rude awakening. This happened earlier last year, but I was really inspired to share it after hearing all of your petty ass responses. So last year, after a really horrible breakup, I had to move with a friend who was moving into a 5-bedroom house with some of her friends from the university. I saw this opportunity as the literal light at the end of a tunnel for me, and even though I was aware that challenges would arise along the way, I didn't expect it to turn into an absolute nightmare. This was a 2-leveled house and I, F27, was living on the first floor with another girl that was about my age. Upstairs lived the three boys, 22, 25, 28. I essentially stopped using the kitchen, or going upstairs at all because I couldn't stand the conditions of the place. There were always people over trashing the place and no one would do anything to clean up. Saying it was messy is an understatement. There was a terrible cockroach infestation because of trash and because the sink was always full with their dishes and leftover food. I made an effort to organize the house many times and eventually they just hated me for asking them to do their dishes, or move their laundry after months of it being piled up over the dryer. So after a few months I gave up and the household was just totally divided. Upstairs was enemy territory and vice versa. I always kept to myself and stayed in my room minding my business. Never invited anyone over because the situation was pitiful and embarrassing. It was such a nice house and it straight up looked like a crack house. Anyways, I hate them lol. One night, like most other nights, they were upstairs playing videos games and listening to music, blasting music and stomping around and throwing shit past 10 PM on a Monday. Now as if this wasn't annoying, my room was directly under the living room and balcony where I could hear every sentence even if they were speaking at a normal level. But considering I could hear them doing lines upstairs, yelling was the normal volume. However this fucking night, they did that until 6 AM. I asked them to turn the music volume down and they blew me off. I had school and then work the next day so I was beyond livid. So having no sleep and finally assuming they were sleeping since their house was dead quiet. At this point I quietly went upstairs. They were passed out on the couch and the kitchen is right next to it. I almost simultaneously started blasting music from my speaker while aggressively throwing the dishes around. And I'm saying aggressively because I was literally throwing pots and stuff around, being as loud as humanly possible. I was so happy disrupting their sleep I still smile when I think about them having to endure that. I kept at it for about an hour and headed downstairs with my breakfast. Having left a clean kitchen, I had heard some of their friends teasing them about being dirty. It was one of the most passive-aggressive and pettiest things I've ever done in my life. And probably better than going to jail for murder LMFAO, but if for some reason I end up as a ghost on Earth, I'm going haunt them as if I was doing the dishes aggressively every night. 3. Edit. Thank you all for taking the time to read and comment on the post. I wanted to clarify a few things I left out in the original post. 1. Yes, they were definitely awake and not able to sleep through the noise. I would see them on the couch every time I turned around and they were on their phone looking miserable. 2. Some people are commenting that cleaning the kitchen was a waste of my time. While to some degree I may agree, my roommate's friends had been teasing and calling out my roommates for living in a pig den. Remember, I can hear all their conversations from my room. So I figured by cleaning it'd be a statement that reinforced that they were in fact pigs living in a pig den. 3. Last thing, some people simply weren't satisfied with the fact that I didn't actually go apeshit on them or called the cops. We went to the same school and had common friends. I simply didn't feel comfortable escalating the situation, having to live with them plus seeing them at school. Oops, I slept with your best friend. When I was in high school I met a girl. We hit it off right away, and began to start going steady. Things went pretty well and we dated all through high school. We did break up twice. Both times she broke it off with me to pursue other dudes, my friends. The second time I had just graduated, and was upset, so I took a job where I traveled constantly. A year later I ended up working in my old hometown, and went to a party. She ended up being there, and just like that she dumped her boyfriend at the time, my former friend. I immediately quit my job to stay in town to be with her. We ended up moving in together and things were going well. We decided to move to a bigger city to find better work opportunities. About a year into the move things started to change. She became very confrontational, cold and distant. She was acting the way she did when she was trying to dump me, so I became very suspicious. I found out that one of my old friends had been in contact with her for quite some time. I can't even explain the rage that filled my body. I have never been so mad, even to this day. I decided I would no longer be her doormat. One night we were invited to a party at her BF's house, where my GF got too drunk and passed out. Now was my chance, so I started flirting with her BF. I wasn't sure if she would reject my advances, but even if she didn't, told my GF that's what I wanted anyway, but she didn't, and we end up hooking up that night. It turns out her BF had a thing for me since we met. I did not tell my GF and her BF didn't either. A week went by and things got worse until finally she broke up with me and said, "You're just not marrying material." She left in a huff. I immediately called her BF and she came over to my house. My now ex-GF called her to vent, so she put her on speakerphone so I could hear. She called me everything under the sun and admitted she was hooking up with my old friend. This was no surprise to me. My ex's BF cut all ties with her after. About a month later, my friends and I were going to go out on the town, and somehow my ex and her new man ended up there. Her new man, my old friend, pulled me to the side, admitted all the shit that went down, so I told him what I did with her BFF. I wish I could have seen her face when he told her. I can see it in my mind. So you would think we were even, an eye for an eye. However, I am very petty. 5 years later, I hear they got married and settled down in a small town. So what did I do? I opened a bar in the same town, befriended all the friends just to get the satisfaction of locking eyes with her and seeing her utter fucking hatred for me. I stayed there for 7 years, in which time those two got a divorce. I felt like my job was done, sold the bar and moved away. And wants resort upgrades for a resort she's not staying in, and puts the actual safety of her nearly drowned son behind being found out. Edit. Thanks so much for all of the awards, as well as the endless stories of pool days gone wrong and lifeguard rescues. I cannot keep up at this point. I've been trying to respond to every comment and DM, but it's become overwhelming. Please forgive me if I miss yours. I'll also say that I now plan to share more stories soon, after being asked dozens of times. You all made my day. Thanks again. This happened Memorial Day, opening weekend of 2006, but feels like yesterday, and the details will always be fresh in my mind. It's long, but definitely an enraging story worth reading. This is my first post here. My very first legitimate job at age 16 was as a lifeguard for both the indoor and outdoor pools at a large lake resort. I had absolutely nothing to do with reservations/rooms/housekeeping/the restaurants, etc. I was a fucking lifeguard. It was my third day on the job. Anybody could access the outdoor pool, and since the resort was located in a state park, open to the public, we often had people coming up from the lake and the marina trying to swim in the pool. Anybody could buy a season pass or a single-day entry to the pools, and we had 2 employees that would periodically walk the outdoor pool deck to check for either room keys or pool passes. One day, a woman that was letting her young son swim freely without any supervision was sitting at a table with an umbrella on the corner of the deck, slurping down alcoholic beverages. She kept sending her slightly older daughter over to my lifeguard stand to complain about things. My mommy wants to know why nobody has come to take another drink order. My mommy says the umbrella doesn't give enough shade, and wants to know if we can move to the upper deck. The upper deck was reserved for guests of the resort, and had assigned tables and chairs with umbrellas, per room number. The third time this kid came up to me, without taking my eyes off the water, I told her to let her mommy know that the lifeguards weren't in charge of any of those things, and that I couldn't carry on conversations with anybody while keeping people safe in the pool. Daughter goes back over to mom. Mom walks over and pulls son from the water to talk to him for a minute, and then son gets back to swimming. I'm actively scanning and can see all of this. 5 minutes later, M comes storming over to my stand and demands that I give her a spot on the upper deck. When I refused to look in her direction and started to tell her she'd need to talk to the front desk, she, somewhat quietly, hissed at me about how rude I was being. Next thing I know, son goes underwater. He's in the deep end, where he can't touch, and isn't a strong swimmer. He was holding onto the ledge but got distracted. I wonder what by. And let go. I immediately blow my whistle and jump in, pull him up and out of the pool, and start assessing him. The other guard on duty blows her whistle and empties the water. Protocol for a rescue, there. Everyone is watching, and M screams, "How dare you ignore my requests? How dare you embarrass my son, and me, like this?" She yanks her son up by the arm and starts pulling him towards their table, as I follow and tell her we need to wait on EMS to arrive, which the other lifeguard has called to the front desk and requested via radio. She screams, "He is fine and we are leaving." Son is coughing up water and crying, and I attempt to tell mom about delayed, dry, drowning. By now, the aquatics and resort manager are walking our direction. The managers both make it to us, and M is refusing to wait for EMS, screaming that she's a CNA and can care for her own son, that dry drowning isn't real, and that we can't keep them there. The aquatics manager asks her to stay long enough to fill out an incident report, refusal form, and the resort manager asks for her room number so they can be checked on later. This is when everything clicks. M has no room number, which I already knew but didn't have time to mention to my manager. No pool pass and no right to be there at all. She's willing to risk her son's life in order to avoid this information becoming apparent. She snuck in after the last deck check and planned to leave as the next started. About a 2-hour window. Daughter is crying now, saying, "Mommy said we were coming here to swim and get ice cream." M is screaming about suing me and the resort, and is belligerent enough that management determines she's drunk and can't drive with her kids. Park rangers show up, followed by EMS, and the rest is out of my hands and I honestly don't know what happened to them. I do know the family was permanently banned from the resort, though. That was the first rescue I had ever made, and I was commended for it by management and other pool goers. It was a wild Sunday. I went on to be a lifeguard for nearly 15 years, at pools and lakes and the ocean, as well as to manage my own pools. I could tell endless stories of entitled parents and children that I dealt with on a regular basis, especially as a pool manager. But this is always the story that sticks out in my head, since it was my first job and my first rescue. I've wanted to share here for a long time, and thought of this story after reading a post about an entitled man demanding free upgrades over at r/tales from the front desk. Thanks for letting me share, you all. M accuses me of stealing my own $700 unique collectible card. So, about 4 years ago, me and my classmates, back when we were teens, got into a card game called Magic: The Gathering. It's like Pokemon if that helps. I had a pretty big collection and also adopted my dad's collection, which was really valuable. During the vacation me and my friend went to the Magic: The Gathering playing club. So now, it comes in. The day went as usual. I played with my new-made friends and chilled out. I left to go to the toilet, but when I came back I noticed a kid, about 9 years old, looking over my card binder. I went up and asked, "Hi, are you looking at my cards?" "Yes. I like MTG, short for Magic." "Cool. Would you like to play with us?" I was pretty chill even though the kid looked sus. "I don't fully know the rules, but yes," the kid explained. "We will teach you them, don't worry." So the rest of the day went normally, but the next day, I noticed the kid's mum coming up to me. "Hi, my son told me about your big card game collection." "Yes, that's true." He seemed really interested. "Actually, could you give it to him? He's young and you are a teenager. I was 15 at the time. Sorry, Mom. The collection is worth a lot and I really like to play MTG, it is entertaining. I'm still a child. Besides, many adults play the game. Come on. It's not like you need them. These are just some worthless cards. Again, they are worth a bunch. Okay, I understand. I thought that at this point she might give up, but here we go. I will give you $150, it's all I have right now. I'm sorry, the cards aren't for sale, no matter how much you would offer to pay. One card, the Gaia's Cradle, is worth about $700. At this point Em didn't believe a word I said. She started shouting. $700 for a piece of printed paper? Don't fool me. I was getting frustrated. I have to go home, it's getting late. If you want, I could recommend what cards to buy for your son, they are cheap. Keep in mind the Gaia's Cradle is worth a lot cuz it's extremely old and rare, out of print. I thought this was it, but the day after when I was playing with my deck, it showed up. I thought nothing of it and continued playing, but then I noticed my binder, containing the most expensive and valuable cards, was gone. I asked my friends if they have seen it and one person told me that they noticed a young kid carrying it out of the room. I immediately ran to the door and hoped to find Dick. I noticed him on the other side of the door talking to Em. I saw her put the binder into her purse. I confronted them and asked if they could return the binder. Are you talking about the little Pokemon cards I bought for my son? No, Mom. The MTG cards you asked me about yesterday. I saw your son taking it and you putting it into your purse. These are the cards I bought for his birthday 1 week ago. At this point I had enough of it. Could you please show me your purse? Surprisingly, Em showed me her purse and I quickly grabbed the binder, making sure that all cards are there. I started running back home, really mixed up about what just happened. After some time I heard a loud shriek coming back from the road. Help. This boy stole my boy's toy cards. I just came home and explained everything to my parents. The next day, someone knocked on my door. My father opened it and noticed Em, and a police officer, yes, a police officer, standing outside. Hello sir. I heard your son took this child's cards. Is that right? After hearing this I came right to the door with the cards. I interrupted. Hello officer. No, I haven't taken these cards. In fact these are my cards and the boy took them from me when I was with my friends. You can ask them. They will tell you the very same thing. I need more proof. Well, this kid doesn't know anything about MTG, so how about you ask us what the cards' names are? The cards had a name and an artwork. He covered the name and asked us about the names. The kid didn't know any names. Of course he didn't, and the officer gave the binder back to me. I thanked him, he apologized and my father closed the door. I didn't want to know what happened to Em and Dick. I assumed they learned their lesson not to steal other people's things. I noticed them walking somewhere from time to time and avoided them like a swarm of wasps. Am I the arsehole for telling my rich parents that my lower class friends and their families are better people than they could ever dream of being? I'll start by saying that I'm a 17M. Both my parents are very successful lawyers, and we live in a super nice house. They had given me everything I could ask for, but they're not exactly there for me emotionally. I can't remember the last time we ate dinner together or had a decent conversation. Most of the time they're not even home and it's just me. I feel like a ghost in my own house. We moved to a new town not too long ago, and my parents enrolled me in the more exclusive private school in the area. I've gone to private schools my entire life. But my experience at this school was horrible. I'm short, effeminate looking, and obviously gay. The only reason I didn't get my ass seriously kicked was because my parents are rich. I begged my parents to switch schools, but they were hesitant because the only other option was public schooling. I finally escaped the private school of circle jerking, and enrolled in this new school. I guess I should mention that a few years ago, this school district expanded their enrollment zone to slightly cover a lower income area, which resulted in a handful of students from low-income families being enrolled. My first few days at this new school were brutal, with a lot of the same problems following me. Until I ran into Garfield. It's a family name. I swear he's not named after a cat. He spoke up and said he would love to be my lab partner when no one else would. We quickly became friends and he introduced me to his childhood friend also attending the school named Eduardo. Since my parents are so distant to begin with, they never noticed me spending so much time with my new friends. Garfield's mother is a waitress and his dad a construction worker. Eduardo's mother cleans houses and his dad works odd jobs, such as driving for Uber. Both of their families are amazing and involved. I started dating Garfield and had real friends for the first time ever. Both Garfield and Eduardo have come over to my house about twice and met my parents. The other day, my mother pulled me over and casually mentioned that I was spending a lot of time with that blonde boy, Garfield, and the Hispanic kid. She asked what their families did and where they lived, and I told her. She immediately became upset and said I was aiming way below my abilities and these were not the kind of influences I needed in my life. I asked why, and she said we just live different types of lives and I'll understand when I'm older. I freaked out and said both of them and their families have been there more for me in the 6 months I've known them than my parents ever have and that they're cold, unfeeling snobs. My mom started crying and said public school has changed me for the worst. I've never seen her cry before, and I'm starting to feel horrible. Am I the arsehole for saying they're rich hypocrites and that my friends' families are better? Am I the arsehole for telling my daughter it's her fault she has no pictures of herself? Okay, so I, 54F, have 5 kids, 3 bio, 2 step. The issue is with my eldest Clem who is 26F. The only pictures I have of Clem are from the day she was born to around her 8th birthday but none after that. She would ruin any picture she was in by making funny faces, hiding from the camera, making weird signs with her hands, or by messing with other people. It was like this until she was 12 when she started to straight up refuse. We would tell her to come for the family photo, but she would refuse. We never forced her, but would gently encourage her. She even refused school pictures. I have no pictures of birthdays, graduations, prom photos, holidays or days out with her in them. It broke my heart because I don't have any pictures of her growing up. Family photos look odd, because she's not in them. Clem is 26 now and is pregnant with her first child. She brought her so over for dinner and after we were looking at photo albums. We got to hers and she saw hers was nearly empty. She asked where all her pictures were and I told her she refused to have any taken. She got all teary-eyed and told me to stop joking. At this point, I'm very annoyed. I tell her I'm not joking and that she did this to herself. I told her if she had swallowed her pride and had even one picture, we wouldn't be like this today. She got angry and thought I had printed out the ones she had messed up. She got super upset and went to sit in the car. The next today, I got a few texts from family members calling me an asshole for putting her on blast and humiliating her. Am I the asshole? Edit. Thank you for all your replies. I do want to clear something up. Whilst I agree it was a shitty move not to include goofy or rude pictures, that's not what Clem has an issue with. She's upset that I have no pictures of her from age 12-18 to fill the album with, and the few I do have, caused extreme reactions from Clem. I can't fill an album with pictures I never took. That's what she's upset about, not the omission of goofy, rude photos. Edit 2. To those of you saying who cares about rude gestures, or goofy faces, I didn't realize this needed saying, But the family photos weren't just for me, they were for everyone involved. Aunts, uncles, cousins, grandparents on all sides, etc. I can guarantee none of them want an 8 years old making the eat out gesture in what is meant to be their nice family photo. Edit 3. It's kind of sad to see so many people assume that because a child has anxiety, that I berate them whenever they mess around when taking a photo. I never yelled at Clem for making silly faces, would simply encourage her to stop and smile, but her rude gestures and faces would ramp up. But I guess that's what you expect on this sub. Everyone hates their kids. Am I the asshole? Update. Am I the asshole for telling my daughter it's her fault she has no pictures of herself? Update. So it's been less than a week because I wanted to make amends ASAP, so I printed off all the pictures and put them in the album. They didn't fill it, but I made a spread on one of the pages that said go make new memories with a picture of her and her fiancé. I put a lot of work into making it look cute. I called her and asked to talk. She arrived and we had a long discussion. I asked if she had any trauma or self-esteem issues, in a more tactful way, obviously, and she said no, she simply did not like having her photo taken and adopted the behavior of screeching and kicking to avoid photos. She did say she had anxiety and that's why she had panic attacks, but that it was mostly because she was gassing herself up, if that makes sense. I knew she had anxiety, but not that she gassed herself up, if that makes sense. BTW, gassing herself up are her words, not mine. Regarding her visit, the one that kicked things off, she explained that she was embarrassed by her behavior and even more so when it was exposed to her fiancé. She said she didn't quite realize how much time she had lost and that it was very emotional time for her. I apologized for my wording during our spat and we both made up. I even showed her the post and we read the comments together. We had quite a laugh at all the armchair psychologists and internet detectives that claimed just because she knew a sexual gesture as a child, she was in danger. Some people were writing borderline fanfiction and rewriting my entire history with my daughter based on one post. That's talent. After a little bit of talking, I brought out the album and gave it to her. She was happy, and she seemed to take responsibility over the fact she refused to have pics taken. I told her I had printed out the candid ones from when she was 12-18 and asked if she wanted them. She said no. She really liked the page with her and her fiancé, which made me super happy. So that's that. You might find this hard to believe, but other than this incident, which we are working through, we have a very good relationship. Edit. Wow, thank you for all your kind comments and rewards. I'm slowly working through all the comments and replying to as many as I can. Crazy Clarinet Lady. I work at a local nameless music store in my town. I'd give it's a gift or a sixth sense or something, but I usually get a gut feeling when dealing with a customer is gonna go south. She gave me this feeling. She walked in with her son and I think a friend? She's about middle-aged. Not joking, Karen haircut, and she looks like twice my weight. At first, she was polite and pretty normal. She was picking up her son's clarinet that she had dropped off to be cleaned and checked over. Grabbed the case for it, set it on the counter and began to ring her up. We have these checklists that are marked with everything the tech did to the instrument, and I'm supposed to read it to them and then let them keep the copy. So I say that we cleaned and wiped down, etc. Everything's going fine, but just before she's about to pay, she asks me to get a Q-tip. I don't really think twice about it, and run and get her a Q-tip. I'm just about to close it up when she digs the Q-tip into one of the holes of the clarinet and pulls it up and goes, "Does that look clean to you?" Me. Well, I guess not. Let me see. Looks like you only got it cleaned and wiped down. Did you want it to be disassembled? Disassembled and deep cleaned. CCL. Well, I wanted it cleaned. Me. We had it cleaned and wiped down, says right here. CCL. Well, you didn't clean the whole thing. Me. We didn't disassemble, it looks like. I can put it back in the shop and have the tech give it the extra treatment. CCL, I don't want that. That'll take too long blah blah blah, just don't charge me for the cleaning. Me, let me talk to my co-worker, see what I can do. Talk to my co-worker? We decide to call the owner. Basically the next fucking hour of my life was hell. It blended all together of me trying to stay calm and polite, calling my boss back and forth, and trying to tell the lady the same fucking thing over and over again. Some highlights. My boss told me to stonewall, so there were about 10 minutes where we were just standing there. I interrupted this silence eventually by reminding her that we were closing in 30 minutes. She kept telling me these random sob stories out of nowhere, something about a broken down SUV, hospital bills, whatever. At this point, I fucking hated her guts and hoped that she wasn't lying and it was just karma. I handed the store phone to her so she could speak directly to the owner. They argued for about 5 minutes, but the owner's been doing this a while so he had her figured out. She threatened to walk out of the store with the clarinet, without paying. Boss immediately hung up, she slammed the phone into the counter. Boss calls the store again. I answer. He tells me that she can't leave the store with the clarinet if she doesn't pay, and that I need to have to behind the counter now. Phew, okay, I know what to do. The clarinet case is sitting right there in front of her meat hooks. I take the repair checklist, and show it to her. Now if you look here, we did clean it. And I grab the case by the handle. Fuck, not quick enough, she realizes she's been duped and grabs the case with her grubby little claws. Fuck, it's on now. I'm trying to control my anger, and not overpower her in any way. I don't want to give her any ammunition. She threatens to call the police. I reply that we will as well. She fucking finally throws down her card onto the counter and I fucking run her bill. She said she would contest the charge, she never did. Haven't seen her again. I ordered a sandwich just before she showed up and I still hadn't got around to eating it. I hope she turned around and went down a new path, the path of not being a total fucking can. TBH, I hope she stubs her toe every day and her son grows up to hate her fucking guts. 30 minutes of my time wasted. Customer has me help them only to complain and leave cart at store. So I work at a craft store chain with several stores in the area. I'm a cashier, but since we have so many cashiers I often work on the floor when we aren't as busy. Thanks to C-19, we've been having slow incomes of stock piled on top of customers buying more supplies than usual since they are stuck at home having to do crafts. To set today's scene, I was returning items to the shelves when I got stopped by an interesting customer. See, customer. Me. CK1, customers kid 1. CK2, customers kid 2. OSW, other store worker. OSM, other store manager. C, hello, do you have this style of yarn in stock? Me, let me check. C shows me her phone and I find the item that's on our app. There's a SKU there which I look up, and it shows that we are out. Me, I'm sorry, it looks like we are out of that yarn. C, do you have any in overstock? Me, no, we do not. Our list of stock details all stock, including overstock. C, so when will you be getting more? Now, I need to emphasize that processing is not my field of study in this job, as I am normally a cashier. But I do know that we get new shipments in on Mondays, but yarn has been coming in increasingly sparingly and we haven't gotten many new shipments in a while due to low supply. Me, due to delays and low stock thanks to the pandemic, we are not able to tell when any new shipments of that yarn will arrive. C, beginning to look frustrated, are you sure there isn't any in overstock? Me, I'm positive. We do not even have an overstock location set for this type of yarn, as we haven't had overstock for it yet. As we are having this beginning to be repetitive conversation, CK1 and CK2 arrive out of nowhere. CK1 asks her mother a question. CK1, Mom, I need to go to the bathroom. Have CK2 take you. CK2, but I don't know where the bathroom is. Keep in mind, these two children are young. The oldest, CK2, looks to be maybe 5 years old, while CK1 is about 3 years old or so. Me. The bathroom is right around this corner. I point the direction. Shooing her kids off. Yeah, go. Switches back to me. Are there any other stores that may have the yarn? Me, I can check. Can you please give me a moment? Checks scan gun for other store availability. It looks like nearly every single store in the nearby vicinity is out as well. Though there is Random Town, RT. That's across the city, which may have a few. But that's so far. I don't want to drive out that far. At this point I'm trying to stay as silent as I can. I'm not very confrontational at all and tried to let the situation calm down as it could. Was beginning to look really infuriated from such a small thing. And I wasn't one to fuel the flames. Me, I understand your frustrations. But I've checked every single store that could possibly be nearby and every single one is out of stock except for RT. Fine, but I'm going to call them to make sure they have it. I'll spare the most of the 10 minutes she had me help her set up a call with the other store. She insisted I stay and help her call, even when I had many other things I could do instead. During this time, her children had returned and were clearly desperate for their mother's attention, but was physically shooing them off because this call was apparently more important. Eventually, got on the phone with the other store after calling 3 times. Hello, can you check if you have this specific yarn in stock? I have the SKU number here. OSW, other store worker, sorry, we aren't able to do that since we are busy right now and don't have anyone available on the floor to check that. But I need to see if you have this yarn before I drive all the way out there. OSW, there isn't anyone available to check for you right now. Now visibly frustrated. Can I speak to the manager? OSW, I'm gonna put you on hold. Once put on hold, addresses me, craft store, has terrible customer service. At this point, I am baffled. Has now just addressed me, a customer service member of said craft store, complaining about the customer service of said craft store. In that moment, I had no clue how to respond and simply awkwardly nodded. What kind of response was I supposed to give? I want nothing more than to get out of this. And, to be fair, I should have. But I was too awkward to ask to leave. So, for 5 agonizing minutes on hold, I sat with and her energetic children begging for attention. Eventually though, the other store's manager, OSM, picked up the call. OSM, hello. Hi there. Can you check if you have this item in stock? OSM, checks. I'm sorry, we do not have any of that yarn in stock. But I'm at a different store and it says you do have it in stock. OSM, sometimes the system incorrectly puts in the number in stock when mixing up returns. Our apologizes. Are you sure? OSM, yes, I'm sure. Hangs up and turns back to me. I'll spare the next 15 minutes, but I managed to negotiate and look at other yarn she may also need for her project and see if she can get that yarn first. It took many more grueling minutes of shifting through every single aisle of yarn we had, but I eventually helped her get a cart full of yarn for her project. As soon as we finished, I was called up to the register to assist with the line. It was extremely hard to hide the visible relief on my face. Though, this isn't the end of C's story. Luckily enough, even though we had 3 cashiers at the registers, I was unlucky enough to get C back at my register when she went up to pay. Her kids were still running around but C didn't even look in their direction. I was desperate never to see C's face again, so I quickly rang her up. The trouble began near the end of the transaction. C. Shows me a coupon. Me. I'm sorry, we no longer accept competitors' coupons. C. Since when? Me. Since last March. There are several signs placed around the registers. I point her towards one. C. Do you have any other coupons? Me. We have a 20% off coupon on our website. C. Do you have anything better than that? Me. Explains all possible options we have for discounts at our store. C. Can I just? Can I? OGH. Grabs her purse and kids, can you put it on hold? Me. Sure. Wait. Before I could stop her, C nearly ran out of the store with her kids in tow. I tried to stop her to let her know that I needed a name and phone number to put it on hold, but she was gone before I knew it. I was now sitting at my register with an entire cart full of yarn that I spent 30 minutes helping this lady find, only for her to run out the store and demand I put it on hold. Too long did not read. Customer has me sit with them for 30 minutes to make sure they find their yarn. Complains about the customer service of our store to my face, only to leave their cart at the register for me to put on hold once they find out they can't use another store's coupon. Want to promote friends, family instead of knowledgeable current employees? Okay, then I'll shut facility down. I thought about this one for a while before posting it. Trying to decide if I wanted to, and if so where it should go. Finally, after looking at how it all played out, it clearly belongs here. Sit back, as this is going to take a bit to lead into everything and why it happened. Just to set up some background. I was working for a privately run correction facility, PCF for short and anonymity, and had been doing so for nearly 10 years. Names will be omitted for anonymity reasons, even though the facility is now long since closed down. The pay is nothing like what state or federal employees get paid, and it was a constant show of being short-handed. I worked my way up through the ranks from being a frontline officer in the units, to visitation sergeant, to shift commander, and finally security specialist. Bear with me, as this does take a bit to explain why the upward steps came. When I was a floor officer, I worked with others assigned to the same unit to get a general code of conduct going, what we would expect out of the offenders and what we would let slide within reason. Because of this, the unit we worked on ran so well that most thought of the unit as the easiest unit in the facility to work, but it was because all of us ran it nearly identical and were consistent and fair. Eventually this caused my shift commander to move me to other areas as a test and eventually into visitation. Visitation ended up being one of the most demanding positions I worked at the facility simply because prior officers had done so little and were so behind. Along with my partner, which regularly changed because of the stress of the position, we got the visitation department up to code and went from taking 5 visitors a weekend to over 80 visitors a weekend on the regular. After doing this for roughly 3 years, I moved up to Sergeant of Visitation, which was less stressful as it was more supervisory and handling complaints as well as necessary policy revisions. After nearly 2 years I moved into Shift Commander. Here I identified several issues with our overtime policy to include significant favoritism issues as well as corrected several reporting flaws that we were constantly being dinged on by PPMU. Private Prison Monitoring Unit of the Department of Corrections in my state. Because of this, PPMU personnel and I became very close as I worked with them on further clarifying and correcting some of the things we weren't doing quite right. This led to creating several spreadsheets in Excel that more or less made tracking overtime, vacation, assignments, and various other little managerial things far easier to track, with barely anyone having to do much other than add their employees and fill out assignments for each shift. This allowed us to get away from favoritism and more easily spread the copious amount of overtime fairly so everyone was doing their fair share instead of just a handful constantly being taken advantage of, while also making it easier to explain monthly shortages. Higher-ups loved it. PPMU loved it, and many of the overworked frontline staff were delighted by it cause it allowed them to finally get some rest after 16-hour shifts, while others hated it cause they couldn't skate by under the radar without doing their share of mandatory overtime. Part of the new hire agreement was signing you understood there was mandatory overtime and refusal could lead to disciplinary up to termination. During this time we had some changes in administration and the creation of a couple positions that were required as part of our contract with the state, which was renegotiated yearly. This is important to know later on. This included at least one captain per shift. Originally we had 2 lieutenants. A captain of housing, had none prior. A security specialist, also a lieutenant position, and changing several positions from officer to sergeant level. This is where the problems started and a number of the staff started filing complaints, because while the state mandated these positions, the private company didn't like it cutting into their profit margin and begrudgingly agreed. However, our administration saw this as a way to get their friends in cushy positions. Company policy says to promote from within, but our administration found ways to make it seem like most internal candidates didn't meet qualifications while hiring old buddies into newly created captain and administrative positions. I was eventually moved to security specialist and backup shift commander. My new role was creating facility-specific amendments to administrative regulations to ensure we were following the purpose of administrative regulations. This entailed how our equipment was managed, key set permissions, restrictive housing unit, visitation, perimeter security, and making sure all guests/visitors/vendors/volunteers entry policies were followed to include mandatory background checks. I also ended up taking over several other Excel spreadsheets that were required to show each department, and the facility was accordingly staffed the required hours per our state contract agreement. It was quite the handful to say the least, and by closer following the administrative regulations I was quickly making more enemies as a lot of the SUs started showing how incompetent the administration was, namely the major, housing captain, and one of the other captains that were buddies the major got hired on. As security specialist I reported directly to the major, deputy warden, and warden, as well as by extension PPMU. We had regular meetings to discuss issues and how to remedy them, then it was my job to author the adjustments so the major could review and sign them along with the warden before they went into effect. By this time I was the sole manager of no less than 5 major Excel spreadsheets in the facility used in various departments. All of which I trained each in those departments, to include major and captains, as it was to eventually become their responsibility to manage them. This included giving them encrypted passwords if those spreadsheets ever broke, corrupted as Excel is known to do on occasions. However, this didn't happen and I was constantly the go-to in order to get them fixed. After a couple of years of this in comes the private corp to renegotiate the contract, and suddenly my position responsibilities get reorganized into their respective captain or major responsibilities. At this time a new captain position comes open and I put in for it along with several others with similar experience to me, and one that has absolutely bare minimum experience, but is close friends with the major and another administration sitting on the hiring board. Needless to say they get the position and I get bumped to their old position as housing lieutenant. I ask my major why I can't be moved back to shift commander where I can at least still work on all the policies and sheets I've made up to this point, to which my major says to me, "You aren't a captain, and we needed a captain there. Not you. Just be happy you didn't get demoted and stop trying to be a captain." I smile and reply, "Okay, but you do know if you move me to housing I no longer have responsibility over all the work I currently do, as that is all security related responsibilities and housing has different responsibilities, right?" It is important to note that at this PCF housing and security acted like 2 different entities from one another, and security had final say over housing, but it was housing's responsibility to address housing issues before coming to security. This meant moving me to housing lieutenant instead of back to shift commander would mean I no longer had any right to correct them when they weren't following the policies I had written prior, and certainly meant I had no responsibility over any of the spreadsheets they managed. Well, that is how it works here, the major replied. You just didn't get the captain position. I'm sure we chose the best person and there will be no issues. Just do what your new position is, because you aren't a captain, you're a housing lieutenant, and you will do only what is part of that position's assignments. At this point he gives me the biggest shit-eating grin, as he has waited 3 years to put me in my place for making his job harder by actually having to do his job. Okay, I say, and leave the room without saying any further. Cue the nuclear revenge. Now, I had also submitted complaints of harassment and policy violations with updates as further incidents took place, causing the complaint to stay perpetually open, and this was added to the complaint with documentation. This was only another notch to a long-going issue, one that various others I worked with has also joined in on, as they had equally been railroaded, harassed, discriminated against, to include lost wages, and saw the nepotism taking place. It is important to know that the policy on nepotism for this company included language stating that family and close friends could not have unfair advantages in promotion or job placement over qualified or current employees. Now, it isn't immediate, this change, but after a couple months I'm now working as a housing lieutenant and taking care of my new responsibilities. I've shed all responsibility of prior spreadsheets, policy adjustments, and anything that doesn't have to do with my immediate department. It is about this time when things start to go noticeably wrong. Even though I took the time to train, assign management rights, and give password control of all workbooks to the responsible department heads, most of which was the major, it doesn't take long for it all to go to shit. The new captain doesn't know a thing about Excel, let alone any of the reporting software a shift commander has to use sometimes multiple times a day. Is very lacking in knowledge of R and quickly gets various offender and staff complaints. The major isn't keeping track of the spreadsheets he is now supposed to manage, contract compliance tracking and facility entry tracking, because he is just as clueless when it comes to anything computer related, and visitation is slowly going down the drain cause none of the other captains kept open communication with the sergeant officers to help deal with issues and staffing concerns. By this point PPMU is very unhappy and demanding that these areas be brought up to compliance within 30 days, or they will start to pursue fines against the company, cutting further into their monthly profit margin by nearly $1,000 per day out of compliance for each issue, on top of other fines for failure to fill contractually obligated positions. Needless to say, these are fines that add up very fast for those who don't know. At this point my housing captain calls me into his office with another of the admin to give me the assignment of fixing these troubled areas. After reviewing the assignment I smile back and tell him sorry, the major told me I wasn't a captain and that I was to stop doing captain work now that I was a housing lieutenant. This is beyond my assigned post to fix, as it requires me to tell security what to do in order to fix it. We should work as a team. You don't want the team to suffer for this, do you? He says to me. Then the other admin pipes in, Lieutenant, let me get this right. You are refusing to do this because you didn't get the captain position? I then give the same shit-eating grin the major gave me when he told me months earlier. Well, that is how it works here, isn't it? Security manages security and housing takes care of housing unless it jeopardizes the security of the facility. Then it is security's problem, right? I then roll my shoulders into a shrug. I just simply lack the authority to do that job, and the major assured me that you and the other captains all had it under control. I even showed it all to you before I was reassigned, remember? By this point I can see that the captain is getting visibly upset, as they are now entirely responsible for all the work I used to do. The other admin at this point looks at me again and asks, so are you refusing to do this assignment? It isn't that I'm refusing to do the assignment. It is just that with all my new responsibilities as housing lieutenant I simply don't have the time to do them, and the work of a captain, which the major made very clear I'm not supposed to do the work of any longer as I am not a captain. I then stand with a smile, so no, I am not refusing the assignment. I am following the orders of a higher superior that told me to no longer do anything outside of my assigned duties as a housing lieutenant. Last I checked, the post orders I signed stated I was only to do assignments that are of housing unit responsibility, which also is signed by the major and the warden. Now if you don't mind, I really have other responsibilities I need to get back to. I then smile to both of them and walk out of the office as I was currently in the middle of getting vacation request and working on offender housing assignments to ensure we were in compliance with SDG, security threat group, and racial balance requirements for the nearly 1,000 offenders in the facility. About 20 days later I receive a phone call while on vacation at 8 AM from the stand-in warden. Our warden had been put on administrative leave pending investigation, along with said housing captain. "Is this Lieutenant?" asks the stand-in warden, to which I groggily answer, "Yes it is. Who is this?" "This is stand-in warden, and I'm sitting in the room with housing captain, who has brought something rather startling to my attention. He is saying that you refused to do an assigned duty that resulted in the inability to track various things in the facility. Is that correct?" At this point I sit up in bed and answer, "Yes, that is correct, but that is because I don't even get to finish, as this stand-in is clearly upset at my admission and interrupts me. You do realize that this is insubordinate behavior that is gross in nature, don't you?" Anger clearly in his voice, but a controlled anger. I can only imagine that the housing captain is sitting in the room with a shit-eating grin. Am I going to get to answer, or are you going to interrupt me again? It seems you have already made your mind up on the matter given the tone of your voice, sir. I respond. You're correct. I've decided that your negligence in performing duties as assigned is gross in nature and believe this meets the required parameters for immediate termination, effective now. He pipes back, obviously not happy with what I said. You do realize I will be adding this to my complaint of workplace harassment and retaliation if you do so without getting the full story, don't you? This means that I will be adding your name to the complaint for failure to do your due diligence in getting the full story, on top of the warden you are currently replacing, the housing captain sitting with you, the major, and several others for violation of your own disciplinary policy. I'm shaking at this point, angry that this is happening and that I have to resort to this extent to get the point across. And yes, I do have access to all of the documents, including all current policies of the company, the current contract between the company and the state, and will pursue this if you continue with this. You do what you feel is necessary, and I am doing what I feel necessary. As of this date you are hereby terminated. You will receive in the mail the disciplinary form and decision to include a formal answer to your complaint by the week's end. You see, if you're part of that complaint you no longer can issue the formal answer according to policy. It will now have to come from corporate HR, who will have to agree with your decision and already has copies of the complaint as well. My voice now shaking from my own anger. Well, then you'll be hearing from them, I suppose. The phone then hangs up, but not before I could hear the change in his tone of voice as well. I wasted little time in updating my complaint and notifying the corporate HR person I had been in contact with for about 6 months now. The aftermath. A week later a notice was sent to all employees that the facility would be closing their doors permanently in 90 days, and I continued to receive my full 40-hour-a-week pay until the day those doors closed without ever having to return to work. I was then later allowed to file for unemployment, as well as the technical reason for loss of employment was through no fault of my own. I later found out from the HR department that the facility was closed due to 4 major reasons. 1. The company was no longer making any profit due to poor management decisions that lead to PPMU issuing upwards of $75,000 in fines per month on top of out-of-control overtime due to shift commanders not properly tracking their shift officers' overtime, vacation, or days off. 2. Many of the administration and captains had received numerous complaints of company violations to include harassment and nepotism. 3. PPMU investigated the qualifications of some of the recently hired, promoted administration and captains as they too were suspicious that they didn't meet proper qualifications for the position. This means they were entitled to back fine all the days those positions were filled simply because they were unqualified candidates. 4. The investigation found all complaints to be valid and would require termination of nearly all of the current administration, 2 captains, and 1 HR for failure to correct the issues, meaning it was easier to just cut their losses rather than try to fix it. Why was this nuclear revenge? Well, the state had to quickly move and relocated nearly 1,000 offenders, 250 people lost their jobs, of which 15 of them ended up fired due to policy violations resulting from the investigation of nepotism and workplace harassment. A few had workplace discrimination and resulted in one person, who was not receiving fair wage of others of similar position, to receive back pay of upwards of $38,000. My start of complaints led to others filing complaints for similar reason in the nearly 2 years leading up to this, adding to documentation of the issue that resulted in the closure of the facility. Even knowing the impact this had, if I were to live through it again, I would still have done the same thing.
Don't forget to subscribe so you can stay up with the best content from Reddit.